No One Lives Under the Lighthouse is one of my favorite indie horror titles of recent, and unfortunately, you can no longer play it. Well, to be specific, it's very difficult to play the version that I'm talking about. No One Under the Lighthouse was originally released in 2020 as a PC game, and it received a director's cut update in 2023 for PlayStation 5, Nintendo Switch, Xbox One, and Xbox Series X. So, effectively, if you want to still play the game in its original form, you'll have to download the game on Steam and select the feature beta version. Then you will be able to play the original form of No One Lives Under the Lighthouse. However, it's not clear or ever mentioned when you download No One Lives Under the Lighthouse that this game has been given a director's cut version. At least, it's not really stated. When I originally saw the playthrough of No One Lives Under the Lighthouse, I was completely infatuated with the game. So when I heard it was getting a console version, I was ecstatic. More people were going to be able to play the game, be introduced to it, and I downloaded it right away. So when I started playing through the game, I was confused when suddenly things were different, and the graphics were different, the game was different, the story was different. It wasn't the same game anymore. And suddenly I checked the page and there's this director's cut statement attached to it. So thankfully it has still been preserved on Steam, but you have to kind of dig for it to try and find the version of No One Lives Under the Lighthouse that, in my personal opinion, is the preferable one. But you may ask, why is the original version of No One Lives Under the Lighthouse the preferable one? Well, let me just give you a summary of the game real quick. The player takes the role of a lighthouse keeper, as you would expect. You go through about 4 days of taking care of this lighthouse, but it's truly the atmosphere of the game that is what's so memorable to me. You're truly alone on this island. You're dropped off with nothing but your one suitcase. Every single day, the island changes, introducing fog and heavy rain that's nearly impossible to see through. And things just grow more and more nerve-wracking as there is this basement cover that you sometimes hear noises coming out of. Surreal things begin to start happening as you're taking care of this lighthouse. Slime appears on the walls. Moths start flocking to your windows at the top of the lighthouse. And you just start to feel like something surreal is happening. But the game truly starts diverging between the two versions of the game. Primarily one in the creature design of this thing that seems to be pursuing you on this island. There seems to be more of a bug-like, insect-like design that's maybe less threatening and more kind of disturbing looking in the original that I very, very much enjoy, and has this very strange looking face with these squiggly looking, I don't even know how to describe it, I'll just let the visual speak for it. Whereas in the director's cut, it's more of this kind of split open maw-like thing that's not really bug-like looking to me. It's more of like, I don't know, just kind of demonic. So I feel like it doesn't really fit the theming of the story. And secondly, I would say that the director's cut also just extends the length of the game significantly more than the first one, and kind of convolutes the story in a way that I feel like is very unnecessary. Sort of spoiler territory here if you wish to play the game yourself. From what I could gather, No One Lives Under the Lighthouse is sort of this cyclical story where a lighthouse keeper is brought to the island, and then they are attacked by this sort of monstrous bug-like creature. And then they are brought to the center of this island that is sort of alive in this sort of Lovecraftian kind of way. They are killed and then transformed into another bug-like creature. And then the cycle continues. Another lighthouse keeper is brought. They're killed, they're transformed, and then brought to the island, and then this continues. And at least that was what the story was in the first game. It was very simple and straightforward. But the second game kind of has this story of like a cult. There's this temple that you go through. There's an introduction of a father figure. It's all very confusing. There's a lot more dialogue that's added. There's almost no dialogue in the original version, which I thought was incredibly interesting and I really enjoyed. There's almost only one or two lines of dialogue, but there's tons of dialogue in the director's cut that just really kind of goes over your head. It's actually very fast on the screen and I can't read it very well. So again, I feel like the original is just so concise. You can play it in only about like an hour or so, whereas the director's cut's like maybe 3+ hours perhaps. But it's the feeling of just bogging it down, which leads me into my next point, that the director's cut also adds combat, which the original does not have. The director's cut adds combat. It adds a boss fight, which determines specific endings for the game, whereas the original did not have any combat, which also was very clunky. I didn't enjoy it. And again, I don't feel like a horror game necessarily needs combat at all. The original was just fine without it. So it's just another one of these things that I felt like the game just tacked on for this extra length that the original didn't really need. From the things that they cut from the original in combination to the things that they added, overall, the director cut's experience is just completely lacking in comparison to the original. The small amount of cutscenes that the original has are just fantastic in terms of storytelling and building suspense. I was so sad when there were certain scenes that I had loved so much that I didn't see in the director's cut, like when the bug monster is hesitating for a moment when it looks at the phonograph and perhaps just for a moment remembers being human. There's another moment where you, from the monster's perspective, are crawling through the heart of this island, through these like ventricle-like vessel into the center of the island, and then the island physically speaks to you. That's not in the director's cut either. Scenes like that really stuck to me. There's another scene where you physically look into the mirror and see that you have transformed to this creature. Very, very visually memorable scenes like that are just completely cut from the director's cut. And instead, I felt like it was just slogged down by NPCs ranting about nonsense and a lot of extremely janky combat. So I would highly recommend, if you do want to experience No One Lives Under the Lighthouse, download the Steam release, use the beta, and experience it in its unbogged down, purest form. That's just my opinion, but sometimes I think creators get a little bit too caught up in adding details, and sometimes just the simplest original forms are the best.